is in the synoptic gospel of Matthew and Mark that this story is told. In Matthew, it's in chapter 9. And Matthew, Mark, since Mark follows Matthew, let's read Matthew first. Chapter 9, he entered the ship, passed over, and came into his own city, which is Capernaum. And behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. Now notice he didn't say seeing his faith, but seeing their faith, which means whoever was carrying him with similar faith. That means you got to have people around you who have some kind of faith when they're dealing with you, particularly if they're carrying you. Now, if we're going to get healed and you don't believe he'll heal me, then you'll stop by the wayside. Because I can't get over there myself. I need you to get over there. But I don't need you coming over there doubting. I need you believing too. And behold, certain of the scribes said within themselves, the man blasphemeth. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, wherefore think ye evil in your hearts? For whether is easier to say, thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, arise and walk? But that ye may know that the Son of God hath power on earth to forgive sins. Then saith he to the sick of the palsy, arise, take up thy bed, and go into thine house. And he arose and departed to his house. Now in Mark chapter 2, he is a little bit more detailed. And again he entered into Capernaum after some days, and it was noised that he was in the house. Interestingly enough, that somebody followed him enough to know where he was and spread it around. It was a noise. It's interesting that in any field you're a part of, somebody should recognize you within the concept of that field. You shouldn't go unnoticed. Tell your neighbor, I'm too gifted to go unnoticed. Mm-hmm. Now the question is, what is your gift? That's a whole nother. And straightway many were gathered together, in so much that there was no room to receive them, no, not so much as about the door. And he preached the word unto them, and they come unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy, which was born of 4. And when they could not come nigh unto him for the press, they uncovered the roof where he was. When they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. When Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. But there were certain of the scribes sitting there and reasoning in their hearts, why did you go to the meeting? It's really sad that the most negative folk that go to the meeting, they get seats. Now, the one we're trying to help, he can't get in the building. I just saw that. I mean, that first time I saw that. Why doth this man thus speak blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God only? And immediately when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they so reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, why reason ye these things in your hearts? Whether is it easier to say to the sick of the palsy, thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, arise and take up thy bed and walk? But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins, he saith to the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, rise, take up your bed, go thy way into thine own house. And immediately arose, took up the bed. Now they carried him on the bed. Now he took up the bed and went forth before them all, insomuch that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, we never saw it on this fashion. Now, I thought that a good subject might be, or a pertinent subject. Look at somebody and say, faith has no ceiling. Yes, and that's dealing now in a general theological sense, in an open presentation. Look at somebody else and say, there is no ceiling. But in a more subjective sense, tell somebody, I'm walking back. And now you carried me over here, but I'm walking back. You carried me here, but you're not going to carry me back. When I notice Matthew 8 and I notice 9 and even in Mark, there are certain things that come to mind, and the most striking characteristic of faith in these chapters is its audacious display, its audacity. Everyone who operated within the parameters of these chapters displayed audacious behavior when it came to getting into the presence of Jesus. If you check through Matthew 8, 9, and into Mark, you will find that a variety of different people with a variety of different sicknesses and needs operated in an audacious way when it came to seeking to get into the presence of the Lord. You will notice in chapter 9, you will notice the father of the dead girl, the bleeding woman, the blind men. And in this particular text, what we might call the house crashers. And it seems as if they just have this adamant drive to get into the presence of the Lord. It is noteworthy that they didn't just wait until he got in the synagogue, but wherever he was, whether on the street or whether in somebody's house, maybe his own house, wherever he was, somebody was determined to get into his presence. I will suggest to you that if you're waiting to get into his presence at a 7 a.m. service or an 8 a.m. service or an 11 o'clock service and then at 6 and wait till Wednesday at Bible class, then I think that most of your life will be without his presence. You don't have to walk within the parameters of these four walls to get into his presence. Ooh, I hate to say that to the established church, but church is not the only place that you have access to his presence. And I just hope that when you roll out of bed in the middle of the night, or when you are accosted as you drive home by negative spirits, that you have the power to get into his presence. The texts and the context just show us that all determined to get into the presence, and they didn't really care what other people thought, because the leper had no right to be in public, and the bleeding woman had no right to be in the public. If you check Leviticus, you will find in both instances that these people were banned from being around other people because of the nature of their sickness. But the audacious behavior of faith, the boldness that comes with the desperation to satisfy and gratify a need, never seriously takes into consideration what other people think. Anytime you are still conscious of how other people think, when you have a need that other people can't fulfill, then you're not desperate enough. It doesn't matter what they think when you're hungry. It doesn't matter what they think when you're thirsty, unless they are supplying the drink and the food. But if they don't have the capacity to supply the drink or the food, and you are hungering and thirsting after righteousness, then you have got to learn to walk over some people, through some people, in order to get to what you need from God. The important matter then is not what other people think is possible, because many times you're dealing with people who have no desperation like you do, and they have a tendency to be smug and sit and judge you because you want to hurry up and get in his presence. And they have a tendency, as the scribes, to sit in a seat, not needing anything but to pass a judgment, not needing anything but self-aggrandizement, not needing anything but to be pat on their back, while you're not looking for anything but a move of God in your spirit. I don't have the time. I wish I didn't, and I wish I had the strength. But who is it to say, who can determine among us what God will do for me? I mean, who out here has been given the designation of expressing what God would do for me? For you to tell me it has never been done means absolutely nothing to me, because it hasn't been done in your circle does not mean it won't be done in mine. So I can't allow you to decide for me what God will do for me. So I would ask you just to be quiet about this matter and let me go find out for myself. Who is to say what his will is? Because the only way we can find that out is to have communion with him. I have got to be in his presence. And I'm going into his presence with faith. But I'm not taking faith to meet merit. If I were taking faith to meet what I deserve, I really wouldn't go, because I don't deserve anything, because I have lived so awfully that I cannot dictate to God what I deserve based on how I have lived. But what I'm taking faith to is grace, which means I'm taking grace to have taking faith rather, to have a meeting with grace. And what grace is unmerited favor. So I'm not going to him with my record, and I'm not taking to him my behavioral pattern. I'm not going to him with my meritorious works, because I have absolutely none. But what I'm going to him for is, I'm bringing you faith, and I want my faith to meet your grace, which means I'm not coming here to meet wages. I'm coming here to get something that's not fair, and that is favor. I want my faith to meet favor. I think I can make that leap, and that is, I'm coming believing that nothing in my life will stop you from blessing me. I don't have the time, but when I consider the fact that the man who was 38 years sick, and when Jesus found him by the pool of Bethesda, and when Jesus found him there, I remember him saying, "Wilt thou be made whole?" But at the end of this course, he said, go thy way and sin no more. As if to suggest that something he did brought on the sickness. However, in spite of whatever he did that brought on the sickness, he still healed his body, which means that he is not going to hold his healing. He's not going to hold his blessings because of something we did. Because if he were going to hold his blessings because of something we did, then none of us would ever receive a blessing from the Lord. I have to dwell here for a minute. You see, it's an interesting dynamic that the people around you have a tendency not to forgive you of things in your past and hold it against you when you've never sinned against one of them. The one who we sin against is willing and able and quickly to forget the things we have done in order to bless us in our desperation and take us to a level that pleases him. Why should I sit around here and make all kinds of apologies to you when you don't have the intention of forgiving me anyway? What I need to do is bypass you and go to the source of forgiveness and pour my heart out to him. In his prayers and in his presence, prayers are answered. In his presence, power is released. Joy is restored. My deepest need is satisfied if I can just get in his presence. If I can just call on his name until something moves in the heavenlies. Now this is gospel. Yeah, this is gospel. Gospel is faith. Gospel faith now rather is a prayer. And prayer redefined is simply faith bringing need to God. Why do you pray if you have no need? And I'm finding out, as one writer said, that need, a real life problem. I think it's Paul Tillich that says that need is not faith, does not operate in abstract. You have to have a need. And for those of us who think we have no needs, we're sitting in the building and somehow we got a seat and we're judging everything and everybody because we feel like we're all that much. Can I preach like I feel it? There are members in this church who are in the limelight. They're always on TV. So whenever anything happens in their life, the cameras are there and somebody brings it up and puts it in the national light. But we have some members who don't have the TV in their face, and they do the same things. Now, those who do the same things without the lights sit around in the church and make judgments of those who are in the lights. But the Lord doesn't have a difference between those who are in the lights and those who are not in the lights. He's only concerned about who will come out of the light or who will come out of the darkness looking for him. And if you come out looking for him, he'll shut everybody's mouth and give you the blessing that you came to get. Oh, I feel like shouting here. Just touch somebody real gently and tell them, you can't stop my blessing. Say what you want about your theology. This man blasphemeth. Who are you to say what he did? He's got the power to forgive sins. And if he's got that kind of power, he is God himself. I feel it here. I'm not going to keep you too much longer. Bruner says this. And I quote, he says, "This does not mean that we cannot come to Jesus unless we are hurting. But it does mean that we do not have to feel over problems our obstacles to prayer. We don't feel that our problems are obstacles to prayer. We can come with all of our problems." You see, many times it just messes with our minds because people have made us feel as you've got to be guiltless in order to come to the Lord, and that the only way you can get something from him is if you're totally and completely right. But I'm looking here at folk who didn't go to church because the leper couldn't and shouldn't be in anybody's company. The centurion was not allowed in the synagogue, and the bleeding woman shouldn't be anywhere close to church people. And then the cowards, the poor disciples, Lord have mercy, I call them the cowards, they should have been banned. And the demoniacs came and insulted Jesus, and yet still the farthest from the church receives the blessing from the Lord because they didn't come with their records. They didn't come with how they were dressed. They didn't come with their hairstyles and their toes in and their toes out. They didn't come with a whole lot of rules. It's real simple. You have what I got, and I believe you'll give it to me. And I've come to find out, am I right or am I wrong? That's why the leper said to Jesus, "If thou wilt, thou canst make me whole." I feel like preaching, Pat. I'm almost there. Give somebody a high five and say, "Neighbor, I'm not leaving without mine." In the 5 miracles of grace, something special is done. Dale Bruner, Professor Dale Bruner, he grades the faith. And that's the 5 miracles of faith. He says the leper's faith is an A. Because first of all, it's personal, it's modest. And yet still it's confident. Because he says, if you want to, you can make me whole. He judges the despicableness, if that's such a word, of his condition. And he simply says that because of the adversity of his condition and because he's not allowed into the public, he can come to Jesus with confidence, yet he's modest. Because he's saying, if thou wilt, thou canst. If you don't do it, I'm still convinced that you can. I'm just hoping that you will. So he gives his faith an A. The centurion's faith, he gives it a B. Because even though it is excellent faith, he does not have the despicable circumstance of being a leper. He is a man of power. He says to one man, go here, another go there, and everybody follows him. He is a man of power. He does not have the pain as the leper. He does not have the ostracism as the leper. Because even though he's Gentile, he's a powerful Gentile, and you have to give him respect. So they gave his faith a B. When it comes to Peter's mother, or Peter's mother-in-law rather, it does not say whether hers was excellent or whether it was negligible. So because it's neither good nor bad, he gives that faith a C. Now the disciples have had to fail. Oh yes, O ye of little faith. And they're accused of cowardice, yet witnessing all of his works. Now please explain to me, why should the disciples have a failing grade when they're in the middle of all of the display of his magnificent power? If anybody should believe that he could deliver, it certainly should be the folk that are around him all the time. I am convinced that church people become so small that they get so caught up in the ceremonial piety of ritual worship that they forget the basics that got them in here in the first place. Forget your seniority in the city of refuge. Well, I've been there for 20 years and ain't got nothing out of it yet. But somebody can come off the street burdened down with the trials of the world and walk out of here not talking about other people, but talking about the goodness of Jesus. I better behave. I'm acting like I'm 45. The disciples' faith is a low grade, so he calls it a D. Now, the demonics rather, not the Genezaracs, but the demonics, they insulted him and they approached him with abuse. And their spirit was hostile against him. So we'll give their faith an F. But consider whether it's grade A1 faith, because he praised faith. He praised the bearer of faith. He measured faith. He rebuked the cowards and he kept silent. He ignored the insult, but whatever condition it was, he still delivered the healing. I just come to tell you, just come. Don't let anybody tell you how to come. Just come. If you're angry, come. If you're depressed, come. If you're desperate, come. If you're sad, come. Just come. Who is to say what he'll do if you show up? I feel the Holy Ghost. Give somebody a high five and say, if you can't come by yourself, we'll carry you. But if I carry you, you better be ready to walk back, because I'm not carrying you for a blessing and carrying you back home. Oh, I feel like preaching. I feel the whole, y'all sit down, I'm the only one working. It's important to understand that this is gospel. And what it shows me now is that your faith is not the star. Because if your faith was the star, it would have to be on a certain star level. He is the star, which means it doesn't matter what level of faith you have. He is the star. So all he's saying to you is just drag your little self over here and let me do the miraculous wonder, so that when you walk out of here, we're not praising your faith, we're praising the source of your faith. Because if you didn't hear about me and you didn't trust in me, you couldn't get the healing anyway. So God is the one who stimulated you to trust in Jesus, which means he stimulated your faith to place your faith in the God who would deliver what your faith is requesting. So you didn't have faith independent of God giving you faith. So you can't say my faith. He can say your faith, because he gave you the idiosyncratic faith to get you what he wanted to give you in the first place. And he must have wanted to give it to you, because when you didn't measure up with the faith, he still gave it to you. I feel here. That's why he says faith as a grain of mustard seed. Oh God, can I preach just a minute? That's why you got to walk away from legalistic preaching. And I'm convinced that most faith preachers are looking for some money. Y'all excuse me, I ain't gonna get too crazy, but the truth is still the truth. Most faith preachers are selling faith so that they themselves can justify the way they live. That's why everybody's trying to get everybody else's faith. But your faith is idiosyncratic to you. It's like a fingerprint. You can't take my fingerprint and get your blessings. You've got to have your own fingerprint. So we have books out, 7 ways to get a blessing from God. And somebody's going to tell you 7 ways to get a blessing from God. And all of us buy the book. Now that's their conceptualization of how God operated in their life. That does not mean he's going to operate the same way in your life. Because faith is as idiosyncratic as a retina scan. When God looks at you, he looks at what you bring to the table. And you can't superimpose what somebody else brings to the table, because he's looking through all of the nebulous clouds and he's looking at the reality of who you are. Creflo Dollar's faith can't work for me. He can write money cometh on his check, but that don't mean I have to write money cometh on mine. Jakes' faith, my good friend, does not work for me. How he operates within the parameters of his spiritual revelatory experience with God is not mine. He and I are 2 different creatures, and yet still God works for him in the way he believes God, and God works for me in the way I believe God. I'm not envious of how God works for him, and he's not envious about how God works for me, because God works for each one of us according to our faith. So don't tell me I need big faith, and don't tell me I need to buy your book about faith. Give somebody a high five and say, neighbor, I have my own book about faith. That's why I'm still here, clothed in my right mind. Where were you when I was losing my mind? Where were you when I couldn't get up in the morning? But my faith in God has brought me to this place. I'll preach the rest of it another time. Give somebody a high five and say, if you're going with me, help me to get the blessing. When I go to the text, I'm so happy that I found something out. You gotta have folk carrying you who believe like you believe. We're on the way to Jesus, and I'm carrying you for your sake. I'm all right, but I want you to be blessed. Shake somebody's hand and say, neighbor, I'm not going to feel good until you get your blessing. Because if you're a friend of mine, I want you to be blessed like I am blessed. I don't want to be the only one blessed in this family, but if I can walk, I want you to walk. If I got money, I want you to have money. If I'm healthy, I want you to be healthy. If I'm strong, I want you to be strong. So where do we have to go? I'll carry you. Give somebody a high five. Say, I'll pray for you. I'll believe for you. I'll hold out for you. I'll lift you up. I'll encourage you. But we're going to Jesus. I feel like preaching. It's interesting that they couldn't get in the house because of folk that don't believe. There is always somebody in your way to your blessing, and you can't stay outside and give up and walk away. The devil is a liar. If you don't need it and you got a seat and I need it and I'm on the outside, get ready, because I'm gonna break the house apart, because I'm coming in and I'm gonna move the ceiling. Give somebody a high five and say, get them from over your head. Get them from out of your way. You need the blessing. You need to move. Get it. Get it. get it. And I come to tell you, they broke the roof up, and Jesus didn't mention it because they decided, I'm not carrying you home, but I'm walking back. Feel the Holy Ghost. Shake somebody's hand like you won't shake it off. Said, I came in weak, but I'm walking back. I came in sad, but I'm walking back. I came in on weakness, but I'm going back on strength. I feel the power of the living God. When I left home, I was laid out. When I get back home, I'll be carrying the bed. That same bed that was carrying me, I will be carrying the same bed. I'm healed. Give somebody a high five. For the last time, said, when you left me, I was crippled, but now I'm whole. Oh. I'm walking back. Touch 3 people and say, neighbor, 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 I'm walking back. I'm walking back. I got my joy back. I got my peace back. Whatever I was lacking when I came in, I'm going back with it. I'm closing. I'm closing one time. I don't have the strength to close 2 or 3 times. I didn't intend to come in here and leave the way I came. And that's why this message is a follow-up to last week's message of what are you looking for? What are you looking for? And put them in a trilogy because I'm going with one more next week. That is another step from this one. What are you looking for? If you're not looking for much, when you can't get in the building, you would disappointingly say, take me back. But when you're looking for something, and let me tell you something, when you're looking for it and you know you got it cornered, you don't give up when you know you got it cornered. Find a way to get me in that house. Find a way. I'm closing on this note. And as I was studying this, I discovered something. That the place of desperation and intensity to succeed is the same place where it's easy to give up. I want you to see that there is a place in your life where everything looks like a tsunami. And you just look at the horrendous cataclysmic extirpation of the problem. And you say, man, I might as well surrender. And throw your hands up. But to another person with audacious faith, that is the same place to say, I'm going to fight this thing until I get the victory. It's the same place where your back's against the wall and you could surrender. But oh, what a difference when your back is against the wall and you come out fighting. Because I'm not going back on this bed. Give somebody a high five and say, I'll carry you, but I'm only going to carry you one way. Just one way. Somebody in this building, God's calling you now. And he's saying, come on. Because I want you to walk back. Come on. Meet this young man.